One of my favorite command line utilities is a program called awk. Awk is a text processing utility. That means you give it some text and it can grab certain columns, certain rows, certain fields from that text for you. You can tell it to go search for certain string patterns in the text and even replace those string patterns with other strings. It's a really powerful program and it's one I use all the time. I probably overuse awk. I use awk everywhere, especially in my shell scripting because I'm really comfortable with it. And it's one of those programs that once you learn awk, you wonder why you didn't learn it sooner because it's such a powerful program. So let me switch over to a terminal emulator and let's play around a little bit with awk. So I'm going to run the ps command just because this command gives us some output that we can manipulate the text a little bit with. And it's nice and in columns. And that's kind of what we want. Columned information, because then awk can go in and grab certain columns from this output for us. So if I take the output from ps and then run it through awk and then single quotes and then give it inside braces and action, the action I want it to perform is I want it to print and then space $1. That stands for the very first field, the first column. So print the first column from each line. So I should get the output of PID and then these numbers here. And if I hit enter, that's exactly what we get. Now, if instead of the first column, you wanted the second column, you just change $1 to $2. And how it determines what the columns are, spaces are columns in awk. That's what it is by default. You can change the field separator from spaces to any character you like, but by default, if you don't change it, it treats a space as what separates the columns. For the print command, $0, if you do print $0, that means print everything essentially. That's essentially like catting a file. And, or in this case, we're just doing the same thing as the PS itself. It's like we're not manipulating anything. We're just printing the output exactly how it came to us. If I did print without anything at all, that's essentially print $0. Again, it's kind of like a cat. So one of the files that people love to use awk on GNU/Linux systems is the /etc/passwd file. That is a file that lists all the users on your Linux system. So if I did a cat on /etc/passwd, this is what the output looks like. There's not a lot of spaces to it. There are columns. I mean, it is separated into columns, but the columns, they are separated by colons here. Remember, awk treats spaces as the column delineator. So what you would have to do here is you would have to do something like awk-F for field separator. And then inside double quotes, let's tell it, instead of using spaces as the field separator, let's use the colon as the field separator. And then let's do inside single quotes and then in the braces, print is the action and $1. That should give us a list of users on the system. And then of course we need to specify where we're getting all of this from. We're getting this from the /etc/passwd file. And that is a very convenient way to get every single user on the system, on a Linux system. So you use that all the time. You'll use it just, system administration or sometimes through scripting. Sometimes you don't want to get a list of all the users in a script. Now let's take that same command, so I'll do an up arrow, and instead of just printing the very first column, what if I wanted, several columns? Well, you can do that. You can print the first column, and then I could do $6 for the sixth column, $7 for the seventh column. And what this is saying, I want you to print columns 1, 6, and 7 from the /etc/passwd file using colons as the separator. And that's what the output of that would look like. Now, it's not very readable because we didn't tell it to separate the columns with spaces or colons or anything. We told it, hey, print columns 1, 6, and 7, basically all jumbled up together is what that is actually telling it to do. But we can tell it, hey, you know what? Put some spaces in here. So I can do double quotes and then space and then double quotes, inside the double quotes, a space in between the columns here. If I run that, we added spaces to that. Now, that still doesn't look very readable. Probably better than spaces inside the double quotes would be a /T. And what that will do is that will give us a proper tab in between the columns. And hopefully that lines up a little better. And it does. It's much more readable that way. Now, other than specifying a field separator to search for and use, to determine what the columns are, you can actually specify Alt to actually print out the field separator as well, and you can tell it to change the field separator to a different character as part of the output. So if I ran this command right here, what this is inside the single quotes now, I have two different actions. So the very first action is begin and then fs equals colon and then semicolon. OFS equals dash. So this is saying, hey, find the colons, treat them as the field separator to perform these actions, but as part of the output, print a field separator that is a dash. And what do I want you to print? I want you to print the first, sixth, and seventh columns on /etc/passwd. Now if I run this, you can see the output. Now I have columns 1, 6, and 7, and the separator is dashes, and that's actually printed out this time. It actually prints out the separator, where by default Alt typically doesn't print out separators. Now, one cool thing that you can do with Alt as far as printing columns, there's a very easy way to print the last column of each line. It's with print $, capital N, capital F. Let me show you this. What I'll do is let's cat the /etc/shells file here. And this lists all the shells that are available on my system right now. And what I could do is, if I wanted to print out all the shells on my system, but I didn't want the full path name, I just want sh bash get shell zsh fish, the proper names without the full path. What I could do is I could pipe this through awk, or I could just use the awk command. I don't need to cat and then pipe it into awk. I can just do this awk -F, and then inside the double quotes here, I'm going to tell it use the slash as the field separator. And then what I want you to do is I want you to search for a particular string here. So I'm going to do // and what this is inside these slashes here, awk is going to search for a pattern. What is the pattern I want you to search for? I want you to find the beginning of every line, so that's the caret symbol that begins with a slash. Now you have to escape that slash in between the two outer slashes. So it's going to search for basically every line that begins with a slash. That is what we're looking for. That way it ignores these first three lines, which are, not information I'm interested in. And then after that, what we want to do is we want to actually print and $, capital N, capital F, print the last field. And if we did this right, and of course we didn't do this right because I get no output, because obviously you have to specify /etc/shells at the end. My bad. And then I get a list of all the available shells on my system. But you see, there are some duplicates. I have 2 ZSH, I have 2 fish. So what I could also do is, other than just running the alt command, I could then take the output from that alt command and then pipe it into unique, and then it removes the duplicated entries. So every entry now has to be unique, and that is actually a list of all the available shells on my system right now. And of course, through the magic of piping, if I wanted to properly sort this alphabetically, to make this even more readable, I could do that as well. And let me clear the screen, and let's run the df command, because this is another common command that has nice columned information that people love performing awk on. So let's do df, and I'm going to run this through awk. I'm going to go ahead and pipe it into awk, and let's look for a particular string of information. So what I'm going to do is, inside these slashes, what do I want to search for? I only want to return the lines that have /dev. Actually, let's narrow it down even further. I want the lines that include /dev and /loop. So that particular string, /dev/loop. And then what I want you to do is I want you to take those lines that have that string, and then I want you to print columns 1. Well, let's just do 1. Okay, and then let's print a few other lines, and let's do, again, let's just do tabs here. So let's print the second field, and then another tab, and then print the third field. So we're going to take the first, second, and third column on every line that includes the string /dev/loop. And there we go on that. Now, one neat thing you could do here is awk is a proper scripting language in itself, and it does do simple math. If I, instead of printing columns 2 and 3, maybe I wanted to perform some kind of arithmetic, some mathematics on these numbers here. So what I could do is I could do something like print column 1 and then a tab, and then print 2 plus 3. And there, you get column 1, and then you get the sum of columns 2 and 3, the numbers, added together. And of course, if I, instead of plus, wanted to do minus, I could, but on the loops, those columns are actually the same number, so it should be zeros across the board. Now, one of the cool things you can do with awk is you can filter results by the length of the line itself. So let me cat/etsy/shells one more time because it's such a simple file to work with here. And what I could do is I could awk and then single quotes again. And this time what I want you to do is run this function, length, and then inside parentheses, $0. So I want the length of the line, and I want it to be greater than 7 characters. And then give it a file to actually run this on, /etsy/shells. And it's only going to return the lines that were greater than 7 characters, because there was one line that was less than 7 characters. /bin/sh was only 6 characters. You see, I filtered that out by using the length function. If you wanted to see just /bin/sh, what I could do is rerun that command, except instead of length greater than 7, length less than 7. And now the only line that is returned actually was the blank line. There was one empty line. Let me rerun that command and do less than 8. And now I have 2 lines. Now I have the empty line, and then I also have the /bin/sh line. Another example of awk, as an almost scripting language in and of itself. Let's do the ps command again for the processes. I'm going to do ps-ef. This is a list of all the processes that are running on my machine right now. What I could do is I could pipe this into awk, and I'm going to do inside the single quotes this time, and then a brace pair here. I'm going to do an if statement. So let's do if, and then inside parentheses, I'm going to do $NF. So if the last field, because remember, $NF is the last field, space equals, and then if the last field equals /bin/fish, because fish is my default shell, so there's going to be several instances of fish running on the system right now, probably. At least I'm assuming. This will not work, obviously, if fish isn't running, but I'm going to print $0. So every line where the last field is /bin/fish. And right now there are 4 processes running on my system that had /bin/fish as the name of the process. Another cool scripting example that you could do with awk, you could do something like this. Let's do awk, and then let's do begin, and then let's go ahead and get the squirrely braces out. And instead of an if statement this time, why don't we do a for statement? I'm going to do for, and then let's go ahead and declare a value of an integer. So I'm going to do I equals 1, and then semicolon. I'm also going to declare that I is less than or equal to 10, and then semicolon, and then I plus plus. So I want you to incrementally add 1 to I until you get to 10. Right, we're going to take I from 1 to 10, and then what I want you to do is, let's do a print statement after that, and then I'm going to do double quotes, and inside the double quotes I'm going to do the square root of, and then comma space I, comma space, the word is, comma space, and then I times I, and then semicolon at the end. So can you guys see what that's going to do? We're going to take every number 1 through 10 and get the square root of it, right? When it's going to print out the square root of I is the actual square root. I misspelled square, though. Let's go ahead and actually make that the correct spelling, and there you go, the square root of 1 through 10. Another thing you can do with awk is you can have it print out every line of a document that begins with a certain character or a certain string. So here's an example of that from my bash RC. So what I'm doing in this is I'm telling awk, and then inside the single quotes I'm saying the first column needs to be it needs to match this search pattern, and it needs to match the beginning of the line needs to be either a B or a C. And then what I want you to do is print the entire line. So print every line where the very first character is either a B or a C. And those are all the lines from my bash RC that meet that criteria. Now let me clear the screen. I'm going to cat out this file that I created just as an example file here, because you often have this kind of stuff on your system, or sometimes you're dealing with these column layout kind of files, especially where you have line numbers. So one column is just numbering 1 through whatever, and then you have a second column, and sometimes you want to print out just the second column. Now of course with Alt, what I could do is I could tell it just to print out the second column, right? Because spaces are the field separator. But sometimes you may want to do it a different way depending on the layout of the file. So let me show you an alternative method we could use. I could do something like awk, and then inside single quotes, print. And this time I'm going to use this function here, this substring function, and then inside parentheses we're going to tell it to print the $0, comma, and then 4. So what I'm saying in this statement here is I want you to print every line, but I don't want you to print until the 4th character. So ignore the first 3 characters of every line. And if I run that, you see, no longer do I have the line numbers, that very first column. Now I just have the second column, which was a list of window managers. Now, another neat thing we could do to that number.txt file is I could run a command like this here. What this is going to do is it's going to find every line. What I want to do is I want to find every window manager in that list that had the letter O as part of the name. So that is what the match function is doing. It's saying match on every line the letter O. And then every line that has the letter O in it, I want you to run print. And what I want you to do is print that line and then follow it with this string, has O character at, and then the function rstart. That is the index location where the letter O actually appeared on the line. I hope that makes sense. Let me show you this in action. So this is the output. Line 1, xmonad has O as part of the name. So xmonad has O character at the index position is 6, meaning O is actually the 6th character on the line. Now, sometimes you want to print a range of lines, so there's the df command, but I don't want all of this information. Maybe I want only a section of the output from the df command. Well, what I could do is I could pipe that into awk. Let's get into the single quotes, and I'm going to tell it nr, which is the number of records. So think of the number of records as the line numbers, essentially. nr equals 7, so you need 2 equals for it to actually mean equals. So nr equals 7, and then I want you to do a range from line 7 to let's do line 11, and then space, and then we want to run this action here, print nr, the number of records, $0. So if I run that, what we should get is line 6 through 11 printed out from the df command. And there you go. And we even get the line numbers as part of the command, because that's what in the print nr means. Now, if I didn't want the line numbers as part of the output, I just delete the nr part. And now we get the output without the line numbers. A common thing you can also do with awk that I find myself doing occasionally is getting a line count with awk. So what you could do is, let's do this on the /etc/shells file that we were working with earlier. So I'm going to do awk, and then inside the single quotes, I'm going to do end space, and then let's do the print action again. Print nr, again, that's the number of records. That's the number of lines on /etc/shells. And we get 13 returned. That's how many lines are in /etc/shells. Now, what's really cool is you can actually do this on multiple files, and it will actually add the number of lines together. So if I wanted the number of lines all together in my /etc/shells file, and also my /etc/passwd file, I get 55 returned. So that's just a little bit of awk there. I'm not a master at awk by any means, but I know a lot of the awk commands. I know enough to where it's one of my go-to things, especially with shell scripting. If I need to manipulate text in some way, typically I do it with awk, even if it may make sense to do it with other tools. You have other things like grep and sed and a bunch of other command line utilities. I'm always awking. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I probably overuse awk a little bit, but it's such a cool command that I think everybody needs to know about, especially if you really want to start getting serious as far as shell scripting. You really need to know how awk works. Now, before I go, I need to thank a few special people. I need to thank the producers of this episode: Epsy, Gabe, James, Mitchell, Akami, Alan, Chuck, David, Dylan, Gregory, Urion, Paul, Polytech, Scott, Stevens, Finn, Wes, and Willie. These guys, they're my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. Without these guys, this episode about the Alt command would not have been possible. The show is also brought to you by each and every one of these ladies and gentlemen as well. All these names you're seeing on the screen, all these fine ladies and gentlemen, they help support my work over on Patreon because I don't have any corporate sponsors. It's just me and you guys, the community. If you'd like to support my work, I'd appreciate it. Look for DistroTube over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace.